The trade war between the U.S. and China escalated overnight after President Trump's 10% tariff on Chinese imports. President Xi Jinping slammed the U.S. with several of its own tariffs. Those taxes now set to take effect next Monday. Now, this all comes after Trump paused his plans for tariffs on Mexico and Canada for at least 1 month after speaking with leaders from both countries. Just moments ago, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt had this to say about a potential call with President Xi. Take a listen to that.
I don't have any updates on when that call will take place. As you heard from the president yesterday, it is being scheduled and will happen very soon. But the president made it very clear with the 10% tariff on China that he is not going to allow China to continue to source and distribute deadly fentanyl into our country. That was the reason for this tariff. It was a retaliatory tariff on China for the last 4 years of their unprecedented distribution of fentanyl into our nation's borders. So when that call happens, we will provide a readout like we always do.
CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now to help us make sense of all of this. Nancy, thank you for joining us. The president may speak with President Xi as early as today, but this isn't the first time these two leaders have engaged in a so-called trade war. What's at stake here for Americans and the global economy as a whole?
Well, obviously, China, Liz, is a huge producer of goods that we consume here in the U.S. So anytime that we impose tariffs on China or they impose tariffs on us or both, somebody is going to end up paying the price. Some of it will fall to the producers. Some of it will fall to consumers. And so that is why this has become such a huge global issue, because in an era of higher than usual inflation, anytime prices are set to go up even more, it is a concern for economists, for world leaders, for consumers like you and me, for everybody. And so that's why what is happening right now is being so closely watched. These 10% tariffs that the president imposed on Chinese goods went into effect at midnight, and China retaliated by saying, okay, well, next Monday, we're going to impose a bunch of tariffs on U.S. goods, 15% tariffs on coal and liquefied natural gas products, plus a 10% tariff on U.S. crude oil, agricultural machinery, large engine cars. Now, as you said, Karoline Leavitt says there is some kind of conversation that is going to take place soon between President Trump and President Xi. Yesterday, she said it was going to happen today. Now it appears that's up in the air. And so the question is, will they be able to work out some kind of deal along the lines of what we saw yesterday, where President Trump struck agreements with the presidents of Mexico, the Prime Minister of Canada, in order to head off those tariffs.
All right, we're going to be keeping a close eye on that this week, Nancy, but also happening today, President Trump's scheduled to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, where you are right now. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas no doubt will be top of mind in these discussions. Do we have any details about the schedule of this meeting and what the two leaders will discuss?
Yes, so they are supposed to sit down later this afternoon to meet for about an hour. This is the first major world leader that President Trump is going to be meeting with here at the White House since taking office after his reelection. And then they are holding a joint press conference, so they will speak to members of the press here at the White House. And then they're having dinner together. So there will be a lot of time to talk about how the implementation of phase one of this ceasefire is going, where a couple of dozen Israeli hostages are being released by Hamas, where the Israelis have agreed to cease their bombardment of Gaza. And then they'll look ahead to phase two. What are the challenges there? How is it going to work? Phase two is supposed to involve the release of all of the rest of the Israeli hostages. Hamas has said they won't do that unless they get assurances that the war is indeed coming to an end permanently. And so there's still a lot to be worked out to ensure that that goes forward as planned.
And Nancy, we're also following Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first international trip. Moments ago, he arrived in Costa Rica for a meet and greet with U.S. Embassy and staff. But the major announcement came out of his meeting with El Salvador's president last night, involving the future of migrants deported from the U.S. What did we learn there?
This is really remarkable, Liz. The president of El Salvador not only agreed to take deportees, people that the U.S. is sending out of the country because they're in the U.S. illegally, not only people who are originally from El Salvador, but people who are from other countries too, that perhaps the U.S. doesn't have an agreement with, so we can't fly deportees and land those planes in those countries and send them back to their own home countries. The president of El Salvador saying to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, sure, we'll take them here, and in fact, we'll do you one better. We'll even take your U.S. criminals, your American citizens who are convicted criminals in U.S. jails right now. We will happily house them in our mega prison for a fee. This sort of shocked and alarmed some human rights activists who say that's not legal. You can't just deport American citizens out of the country, whether they are a criminal or not.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the developments on that, Nancy. Before you go, though, I have to ask you about this. The U.S. Agency for International Development remains closed today. We just saw some major protests outside those buildings yesterday. Can you walk us through what happens next with this department and its employees?
Sure. So what the Trump administration says is going to happen next is that USAID, which has been its own independent agency for more than half a century, it is going to be folded into the U.S. State Department. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is essentially going to take over USAID as well. It is going to shrink dramatically, but it will still carry out its mission of delivering humanitarian aid around the world, just with a smaller footprint. The reason you're seeing protests and the reason Democrats are so up in arms is because they say you don't have the authority to do that, Mr. President. This is an agency that was created by federal statute, and you need the approval of Congress if you want to eliminate an agency or merge it with another one. So that is the standoff that's taking place right now as USAID headquarters here in Washington, D.C. is shut down to workers for a second day. We simply don't know exactly how all of this is going to play out, Liz.
All right, Nancy Cordes, live from the White House. Thank you so much for that reporting on all of those different topics.